Hey guys, Pete here. Today we're going to look at the callbacks and interesting things that you might have missed in this episode. Of course, I'm talking about The Spoils of War, Game of Thrones Season 7, Episode 4. Quick spoiler warning, of course, this will have spoilers for everything that's happened in Game of Thrones up until Episode 4 of Season 7. I didn't get a chance to do one of these videos last week because I had a bunch of other things I wanted to get to, but some of these are obvious. We're just looking at the episode and seeing some of the cool things that were under the surface in relation to the main plot point. First one I read on Reddit yesterday. It was posted by Redditor Filthy Sumka Burn, and he pointed out that Bran got out-brawned in the Field of Fire 2.0. We're talking about the charge where he comes across the field, he throws his dagger and misses, and then the Dothraki that's charging his direction actually drops down and cuts off the hoof of his horse. Of course, the horse goes down and Bran falls from the mount and chaos ensues afterwards. So what's interesting here is that, we've seen Bran do this same sort of thing in the past. Like, it's sort of his thing that he'll do whatever is necessary to win, even if it's kind of dishonorable. The best example of this was when he fought Ser Vadis back in the Eyrie, and you remember this scene, right? He comes out with all this full armor, and Bran basically just runs away from him. And we learn that, a good counter strategy here is what got him to win. So it's kind of funny to see that the same kind of tactic was effective against him. As Filthy Sumka Burn pointed out, it's just a really nice detail showing how this is not a Westerosi army. The next one was kind of obvious. I know it jumped out to me right away whenever I watched the episode the first time, talking about when Daenerys told Jon that she would fight for the North as long as he bent the knee. I pointed this out in my recap and review that sounds almost exactly like what Jon was telling Mance Rayder when he was about to be executed for not bending the knee to Stannis. After she tells him that he's got to bend the knee, he responds, "My people won't accept a southern ruler, not after all they've suffered." She comes back saying, "Isn't their survival more important than your pride?" So back in Season 5, Episode 1, Jon went to Mance's prison cell to try to convince him just to swear to Stannis because it'll save lives. It'll stop the wildlings from having to suffer. He said, "Isn't their survival more important than your pride?" And to that, Mance responded, "Pride? Fuck my pride. This isn't about that." Jon said, "Then bend the knee and save your people." And then we got the payoff that is what's actually relevant here. "They followed me because they believed in me, because they respected me. The moment I kneel for a southern king, that's all gone." He finishes up by saying, "I'll be honest with you, I don't want to die, but it's better than betraying everything I believe." Jon comes back with the idea, and what happens to your people? You preserve your dignity and die standing, and they'll sing songs about you. You'd rather burn than kneel, a great hero, until winter comes and the White Walkers come for us all and there's no one left to sing. To which Mance replied, "You're a good lad, truly you are, but if you can't understand why I won't enlist my people in a foreigner's war, there's no point explaining." So in the recent episode, we didn't see Jon try to explain why. He just said it a little bit more matter-of-factly that his people wouldn't follow a southern leader. But it is an interesting callback because it was Jon that was trying to talk Mance into doing it, and now he's in the same position. And back then, he couldn't understand why Mance wouldn't do it because of what he just said, right? And now he finds himself in the same kind of position, and it's pretty interesting to see. The next one you probably didn't miss if you read the books. And even if you haven't, you heard this go down, but you might not have known what they were talking about. I'm talking about when Cersei mentions that she is thinking about hiring the Golden Company. She says that Qyburn has made overtures to them. I mentioned this in the recap and review and said that I didn't want to jump into explaining it because it's complicated, and I'm standing by that right now. Just because the book involvement of the Golden Company, we just know that part's been cut out, so it's hard to say how they're going to use them here. But what's important to know is that they are considered the fiercest, and for that reason, they're the most expensive sellsword company that's out there. They number about 10,000, and so they are basically who you go to where money's no issue and you want to have the best. I think that's a fair assessment. We have heard about them in the show. Davos and Stannis mentioned them at one point, and we also know that Jorah had spent time with the Golden Company prior to running into Daenerys and Viserys. So we know what a good and capable fighter Jorah is, so that should be an endorsement to what you can expect from the Golden Company if she ends up hiring them. The next one's a statement that no one missed or a scene that anybody missed, but let's face it, this is just fun to talk about. We saw Bran repeat the words "chaos is a ladder" whenever Littlefinger said the word chaos. Now, whether you like Littlefinger and his storyline and his whole spiel or not, you have to admit that when he's talking to Varys back in Season 3, and he's basically revealing that he's been playing and manipulating things with like Sansa and Joffrey, it's a pretty awesome scene, and the whole speech is one of the best in the series over all of these seasons, I would say. But yeah, so we're sitting there, Littlefinger's kind of feeling out Bran, but he's also trying to win him over, which is going nowhere. We realize later that it never had a chance, but at the time, Littlefinger's playing his options, or whatever you want to say. And he says, he's trying to sympathize with his plight of going north of the wall and living through that, and then coming back and finding chaos. And Bran just throws out there, interrupting him, I might add, saying chaos is a ladder. And the look on Littlefinger's face is fantastic. It was a big moment back then when we found out sort of like more about Littlefinger's true motivations. And he says, chaos isn't a pit, chaos is a ladder. Many who try to climb it fail and never get to try again. The fall breaks them, and some are given a chance to climb, but they refuse. They cling to the realm, or the gods, or love, illusions. Only the ladder is real, the climb is all there is. So we can guess, speculate that Bran had seen this. We don't really know for sure since we don't know exactly what Bran can do. What he's doing now, or the way they're portraying him now, seems to be different than anything we learned about in the books between him and Brynden Rivers, the three-eyed raven, or three-eyed crow they call him in the books. So I'm not really sure, but obviously that shook Littlefinger to the core, because if he knows that, what else does he know? And that's pretty damning what he said there in the context of what they were talking about. So, very cool moment. This one was a little bit subtle, but it was still interesting. When Arya got to Winterfell, it was a callback to when she left the Red Keep back in Season 1. She had to manipulate the guards, to get back in because she was out chasing the cats and got lost in the dungeons and all that stuff. Of course, when this happens at Winterfell, she's a lot more skilled in the manipulation. So it's kind of cool if you look back at that old scene, how she's just basically thinking on her feet. And here, she never even really looks like she's worried that she won't be able to get in. This next one is something that I saw quite a few people point out, and it was that these drawings that we saw, or the carvings in the caves below Dragonstone, where we saw the children of the forest had made these markings, we see that familiar spiral pattern that we've seen over and over again. So we've seen this pop up in different things. We've seen it in seasons 3 and 5. It seems to be a common symbol between the children of the forest and the White Walkers. We saw it on Season 3 when Mance Rayder called the White Walkers artists. When they see this, they see horses arranged in the spiral and all the dead bodies, the men also. And then in the 5th season, when the children of the forest were making the Night King, the very first White Walker as the show canon goes, we see that outside. There was a rock formation around in that area where they did that. We have no idea what the spiral actually means, but it is a recurring pattern, and that's cool that we see it there, and hopefully someday we'll figure out what it actually means. This next one is one I didn't notice, but I picked it up from an article that Kim Renfro wrote on The Insider, and she's actually a really good writer who does all Game of Thrones stuff for that website. But she pointed out that what Dany is wearing down at the beach could be a nod towards her warming up to Jon Snow. She wrote that we've seen several new costumes for Daenerys on the 7th season. All of them had been evoking her Targaryen heritage and even hearkening back to her brother Viserys. She points out that Michelle Clapton has said that every detail of the costumes is meant to convey how the character is feeling or thinking, which is why she perked up when Daenerys was seen with a silvery gray cape in this episode. Now, like I said, I like the costumes and stuff, but I may have to watch this episode quite a few times until I noticed what she was wearing, to be honest. So she points out that she's only worn red capes up to this point, and that's, her family colors, Targaryen sigil colors, but gray is actually one of the colors of House Stark. So Kim Renfrew asked the questions, is it just another monotone costume choice, or are we meant to understand that Daenerys and Jon's relationship is becoming friendlier? This next one is another one that I picked up from her article as well, because I have to tell you the truth, I watched this episode twice and I didn't even notice this either time. But apparently when they're walking down the steps, Davos corrects Jon Snow's grammar, and it's a great callback to Stannis Baratheon. And when she points it out in her article, I remember that happening. But like I said, I guess when Jon was walking down the steps, and they were talking, I was thinking about other things. I wasn't looking for it. But anyways, he asks him how many people he has to fight in the north. Jon answers with questions, I guess, 10,000, less. And Davos says fewer, to which Jon says, what? Now, if you're thinking, well, that's not a big deal, what is that? It is actually, it's not something that Stannis only did once. He's done it twice, both times to Davos. In the one scene, Davos is talking about Stannis cutting his fingers off, saying he didn't mind because it's 4 less fingernails to clean. And Stannis kind of point blank responds fewer, to which Davos responds the same way. He says, what? And Stannis replies, 4 fewer fingernails to clean. So the last one is one that's a callback in a way, but it actually is, I think, drawing a contrast rather than showing the same thing. And I hope I can make a whole video about this because it's really kind of fascinating. I've been thinking about it and reading all these different people's views on it over the last couple days. But the thing I'm talking about is Jaime's charge. When he makes the decision to charge at Daenerys at the end of that battle. And it's kind of reminiscent of Jon in the Battle of the Bastards freaking out about Rickon and charging the field, even though that's the worst possible thing that he could do. And initially, when you look at it, because Tyrion's sort of narrating and saying, oh, you fool, don't do it, you kind of catch the idea that Jaime is just losing his mind and embarking on a pointless suicide mission. But I think it's actually quite different. And I'm not the only person that said this. And after this idea came up, I think that the actor who plays Jaime even mentioned, that Jaime's not an idiot. He knows this is a long shot. Like, he's not in a blind rage. He's making a decision because he knows if it happens, the war could end right there. So it's really interesting. And like I said, I do want to do a whole video because it kind of deserves one. Because I'm in the camp of nothing Jaime can ever do can redeem him for throwing Bran out the window. I mean, I'm a fan of the Bran storyline, and I just will always have a grudge against Jaime and kind of get annoyed when people talk about how great of a character he is. Now, that's not to say that I don't think he's a good character as far as his story is fascinating, right? He killed the Mad King, and that's the defining moment of his life, and we found out he did it for good reasons. And yes, he's a horrible person, but, he's had this arc there where he's tried to redeem his honor, and you can give him kudos for that. I mean, he lost his hand as kind of a catalyst for part of that, so, whatever. But yeah, it's fascinating when you think about where he's gone and how he ended up at this point on this field, where even if he didn't have any of this backstory or any of this interesting stuff going on, it's still an awesome scene and all of that. So yeah, I'll think about doing that before Sunday. These are the things that I came up with from watching and, looking around the internet and reading what other people saw. Let me know what you think. Did you see all these things? Do you think that you had some better ones that I left out? Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel. Make sure you hit the bell there so you get notifications. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.